Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, staring at the view screen with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The planet below was unlike anything he had ever seen. Purple clouds swirled across a violet sky, and through the gaps he could see cities that sparkled like diamonds scattered across the surface. This was Velthoria, home to the Velkari Empire and humanity's greatest diplomatic opportunity in years. 3 years ago, the Velkari had first made contact with Earth. They were an ancient species, far older than humanity, and they controlled 12 different star systems. For 3 long years, both sides had exchanged careful messages, learning about each other slowly. Now, finally, the Velkari Emperor had invited humans to visit their homeworld and discuss a formal treaty. Jake was chosen to lead this mission. He was not the oldest captain in the fleet, nor was he the most decorated, but he had something special. He stayed calm when things went wrong, and he had spent years studying alien cultures. The council believed he could handle whatever surprises the Velkari might present. Kate Sullivan, his second-in-command, walked up beside him. She was a linguistics expert who could speak 6 different human languages and had already started learning Velkari. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes studied the planet below with intense focus. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, "and terrifying." Jake nodded. 12 star systems, Kate. They could crush us if we mess this up." Behind them, Ryan Brooks was reviewing data on his tablet. Ryan was their cultural attaché, a young man with brown hair and glasses who had memorized every scrap of information Earth had about the Velkari. He looked up nervously. "The landing coordinates are confirmed. We'll be meeting the Imperial Chancellor first, then Princess Zarathel will handle the actual negotiations." Jake turned to face his team. "Remember, we're here to listen and learn. Don't make assumptions. If something seems strange, ask questions. Better to look curious than to offend them by mistake." The ship descended through the purple clouds. As they got closer, Jake could see that the Velkari cities were not built in the traditional sense. Instead, they seemed to grow from the ground itself, like crystal formations. Towers spiraled upward in elegant curves, and bridges of light connected buildings that floated above the surface. It was architecture that defied human engineering principles. They landed in a courtyard made of smooth white stone that seemed to glow from within. The moment the airlock opened, Jake felt the difference. The air was thicker than Earth's, and it smelled faintly of flowers he could not name. The gravity was slightly lighter, making each step feel a bit easier. A group of Velkari waited for them. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered in shades of blue and silver. Their heads were crowned with bony crests that Jake knew could change position based on their emotions. Their eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils like a cat's. The one in front stepped forward. His robes were deep purple and covered in symbols that probably indicated his rank. He raised both hands, palms forward, in the Velkari greeting gesture. "Welcome to Velthoria," he said in perfect English, though his voice had a musical quality that no human could replicate. "I am Chancellor Velmoth. The Emperor sends his greetings and his hope for friendship between our peoples." Jake copied the gesture, raising his hands, palm forward. "Chancellor, we are honored to be here. I am Captain Jake Miller. This is Lieutenant Kate Sullivan and Cultural Attaché Ryan Brooks. Earth sends its deepest respect to the Emperor and all the Velkari people." The Chancellor's crest lifted slightly, which Ryan had told them meant approval. "Come. We have prepared quarters for you. Tonight you will rest. Tomorrow you will meet Princess Zarathel, who will guide these negotiations. She is the Emperor's daughter and speaks for him in all matters of diplomacy." They were led through corridors that seemed to pulse with soft light. The walls were smooth and slightly warm to the touch. Other Velkari passed them, and each one stopped to stare at the humans with open curiosity. Jake tried to smile politely at each one. though he was not sure if smiling meant the same thing to them as it did to humans. Their quarters were luxurious. Each human had a private room connected to a common area. The furniture was clearly designed for Velkhari bodies, but was surprisingly comfortable. Through the windows, they could see the city stretching out below them, glowing as the sun began to set. That night, the three humans gathered in the common area to study. Ryan had brought every piece of protocol information they had. They learned about proper greeting gestures, acceptable topics of conversation, and the importance of eye contact in Velkhari culture. The Velkhari valued directness and honesty above all else. "This part is important," Ryan said, pointing to a section in the documents. "When meeting for serious negotiations, the Velkhari use private chambers. It shows trust and creates an environment for honest discussion. The princess will send for you tomorrow morning, Jake. You'll go to her private reception area." Kate frowned. "Alone? That seems unusual." "It's their custom," Ryan explained. "The first meeting is always one-on-one. It's a sign of respect. After that, we can all participate in the larger negotiations." Jake studied the documents late into the night. He wanted to get everything right. This was too important to mess up. Earth needed this alliance. The Velkhari could teach humanity so much about space travel and technology. More importantly, their friendship would give Earth protection in a galaxy that was more dangerous than most people back home realized. As he finally climbed into bed, Jake felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Tomorrow would determine the future of human-Velkhari relations. He needed to be perfect. He had no idea how wrong things were about to go. Jake woke early the next morning, his stomach tight with nervous energy. He dressed carefully in his formal diplomatic uniform, a dark blue suit with Earth's symbol embroidered on the chest. He checked his appearance 3 times in the mirror, making sure everything was perfect. Today, he would meet Princess Zara Thel and begin the actual treaty negotiations. Kate wished him luck at breakfast. "You'll do fine. Just remember everything we studied." Ryan handed him a small earpiece. "This will translate anything you don't understand. The princess speaks English well, but some concepts might not translate perfectly." At precisely 9 in the morning, a Velkhari servant arrived to escort Jake. The alien was young, with bright silver skin and a nervous demeanor. He bowed slightly and gestured for Jake to follow. They walked through more crystal corridors, going deeper into the palace. Jake noticed they were moving away from the public areas. The halls became quieter, more private. This made sense. Ryan had explained that serious negotiations happened in private settings in Velkhari culture. Finally, the servant stopped in front of an ornate doorway. The door was made of what looked like carved crystal, with flowing patterns that seemed to move when Jake looked at them directly. The servant gestured at the door and then quickly walked away, leaving Jake alone. Jake took a deep breath. This was it. He reached forward and pressed his hand against the door. It slid open silently and he stepped through. For a moment, his brain could not process what he was seeing. This was not a meeting room. It was not an office or a formal chamber. Instead, he stood in what could only be described as a bathing area. The room was filled with pools of water that glowed with soft blue and green light. Steam rose from some of the pools, and the sound of flowing water echoed off the crystal walls. The air was warm and humid, carrying a scent like flowers and rain. And standing beside one of the pools, completely unclothed, was Princess Zara Thel. She was taller than the other Velkhari Jake had seen, perhaps 7.5 feet tall. Her skin was a deep blue color that shifted to purple in the light. Her crest was relaxed, lying flat against her head. She had been in the middle of some kind of ritual, her hands raised above one of the glowing pools. For one frozen second, neither of them moved. Then the princess saw him. Her eyes went wide with shock. Her crest shot upward, standing straight up in alarm. Her skin flashed through a rapid series of colors, blue to purple to red to white. She made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a whistle, a noise that Jake's translator could not interpret because it was pure emotion. Jake's face burned with embarrassment. His mind raced, trying to understand what had happened. This could not be right. This could not be the private reception chamber. There had been a mistake, a terrible mistake. In that split second, Jake made the most important decision of his diplomatic career. He did not run. He did not stammer excuses. Instead, he immediately turned his back to the princess, facing the door he had just entered through. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace and began speaking in Velkari, using the formal phrases Ryan had taught him. "Your Highness, I am deeply sorry. There has been an error. I was told this was your reception chamber for our meeting. I did not know. I did not mean to intrude on your privacy. Please forgive this terrible mistake." There was silence behind him. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He kept his back turned, his eyes fixed on the crystal door in front of him. "I will leave immediately," he continued, still speaking formal Velkari. "I understand if you wish to cancel all negotiations. I take full responsibility for this insult to your honor. Whatever consequences you deem appropriate, I will accept them." More silence. Jake could hear the water flowing in the pools behind him. He could hear the princess moving, but he did not turn around. He barely breathed. Finally, the princess spoke. Her voice was calmer now, though still shaken. "Captain Miller, remain where you are. Do not turn around." "Yes, Your Highness." He heard more movement, the sound of fabric. She was getting dressed. He waited, forcing himself to stay perfectly still. "Explain this error to me," she said. "How did you come to be in my private purification chamber?" Jake explained carefully, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "The protocol documents we received mentioned private chambers for negotiations. Our attaché translated this to mean a smaller meeting room, a quiet place for serious discussion. The servant brought me to this door and left. I did not know this was your personal bathing area. The translation was incorrect." "You study our language?" she asked. "Yes, Your Highness. I have been studying for 3 years, though I am still learning. There is much about your culture I do not understand. This mistake proves that." "You turned away immediately," she said. It was not a question, but an observation. "Yes, Your Highness, it was the only respectful action. You are entitled to privacy and dignity. I violated that through my ignorance, but I will not compound the error by continuing to look." There was a long pause. "You may turn around now, Captain." Jake turned slowly. Princess Zarathel now wore formal robes of deep green with gold threading. Her crest was lowered but still slightly raised, indicating continued tension. She studied him with those large golden eyes, her expression unreadable. "In our culture," she said slowly, "walking in on someone during a purification ritual is considered a grave insult. Usually, it results in immediate violence or the permanent end of any relationship between the parties involved." Jake's heart sank. "I understand, Your Highness. I am prepared to accept whatever punishment you feel is appropriate." "Yet you did not flee," she continued, as if he had not spoken. "You did not make excuses. You did not blame the servant or your attaché. You took immediate responsibility. You maintained my dignity by turning away without being asked. You offered to accept consequences, including ending negotiations that your people desperately want." She stepped closer, her head tilted in what Jake was learning was a Velkari gesture of curiosity. "Tell me, Captain Miller, is this typical of human behavior, or are you unusual among your kind?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I would like to think any decent human would respond the same way, Your Highness. When we make a mistake, especially one that harms another, we try to make it right. We try to minimize the damage and accept responsibility." The princess was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, her crest lowered completely, and her skin shifted to a calm blue color. "Come," she said, We will have our meeting in a different location. And Captain Miller, I believe we have much to discuss about your people and their interesting approach to dignity and error." Princess Zarathel led Jake through a series of corridors he had not seen before. They walked in silence at first, and Jake used the time to calm his racing heart. The disaster he had feared might somehow be turning into something else, though he did not dare hope too much. They entered a room that was clearly designed for meetings. It had a round table made of polished crystal, surrounded by chairs that could adjust for different body types. Large windows looked out over the city, and the morning sun made everything glow with soft purple light. The princess gestured for Jake to sit, then took a seat across from him. A servant appeared with drinks in elegant glasses. The liquid inside was pale blue and smelled like citrus. Jake waited for the princess to drink first, then carefully sipped his own. It was cool and refreshing, with a taste he could not quite identify. "Before we discuss treaties and alliances," the princess said, "I wish to understand what happened this morning. Not the mistake itself, but your response to it." Jake set down his glass. "Your Highness, I am not sure what you want to know." "You are military, yes? A captain of a spacecraft?" "Yes, Your Highness." "Then you are trained for combat. You are trained to react quickly to danger and threats." She leaned forward slightly. "When you realized your mistake, you were alone with me in a private chamber. I was vulnerable and you were armed with at least basic weapons, yes?" Jake touched the small device on his belt. It was meant for emergency communication, but she was right that it could be used as a weapon in the right circumstances. "Yes, Your Highness. Yet you chose to turn away and make yourself vulnerable instead. You gave me time to dress and recover. You did not try to control the situation or leave quickly to avoid consequences. Why?" Jake thought about how to explain. "Your Highness, just because I could take advantage of a situation does not mean I should. You were in a private moment. I violated that by accident, but the violation was still real. The only right thing to do was to restore your dignity as quickly as possible." The princess's crest rose slightly, and her skin shifted to a lighter blue. Jake was learning that this meant interest or surprise. "Most species we have encountered would not think this way," she said. "They would either become aggressive to cover their embarrassment, or they would flee to avoid punishment. Some would try to pretend nothing was wrong. But you did something different." "What would a Velkari have done?" Jake asked carefully. "A Velkari would have immediately challenged me to ritual combat to restore their honor. Or they would have fled and ended all relations between our peoples, accepting permanent shame. There is no middle path in our culture. A mistake is a mistake. It cannot be undone." Jake shook his head. "Your Highness, forgive me, but that seems very difficult. Everyone makes mistakes. If every error ends a relationship or requires violence, how do you learn? How do you grow?" The princess was quiet for a long moment. "We do not grow in that way. We strive for perfection from the beginning. When we fail, we accept the consequences." "But perfection is impossible," Jake said gently. "At least it is for humans. We are always learning, always making mistakes. Our strength is not in avoiding errors, but in what we do after we make them." "Tell me about this," the princess said. Her voice carried genuine curiosity now. "Tell me about human mistakes and how you handle them." Jake thought about Earth's history, both the good parts and the difficult parts. "We have made terrible mistakes as a species. Wars, environmental damage, discrimination against our own people. For a long time, we repeated the same errors over and over." "This does not sound like strength," the princess observed. "The strength came when we learned to recognize our mistakes and work to fix them. We created systems where people could admit errors without being destroyed. We learned that shame and punishment often make problems worse, not better. When someone makes a mistake, our goal is to understand why it happened and prevent it from happening again, not just to punish the person responsible." The princess stood and walked to the window, looking out over her city. This is very different from our way. In Velkari culture, admitting weakness is the same as accepting defeat. A leader who makes mistakes loses all authority. A warrior who fails in combat loses their honor permanently. But surely your people learn new skills, Jake asked. When a child is learning something, they must make mistakes? Children are not expected to be perfect. But once they reach adulthood and take on responsibilities, perfection is the standard. She turned back to face him. It is why our society changes so slowly. We have had the same customs for thousands of years. Innovation is difficult because trying something new means risking failure. Jake began to understand. And if I had been Velkari, my mistake this morning would have ended everything. Yes, you would have either had to fight me, which would insult the Emperor and end your mission, or accept permanent shame and leave our world forever. But I am not Velkari, Jake said. I responded as a human. I made a mistake, I took responsibility for it, and I tried to minimize the harm. Then I offered to face whatever consequences came next. And you turned your back to me, trusting that I would not attack you while you were vulnerable. The princess returned to her seat. This trust, even in a moment of crisis, is remarkable. They talked for hours. Jake told her about human history, about conflicts that were resolved through apology and understanding. He told her about scientists who failed hundreds of times before succeeding, about leaders who admitted their mistakes publicly and became stronger for it. He explained the human concept of redemption, the idea that people could change and grow beyond their past errors. The princess shared stories of Velkari history in return. She spoke of rigid honor codes that had prevented progress. She told him about talented individuals who had been cast out of society for single mistakes, their potential wasted. She admitted that she had been arguing with her father and the court about these issues for years. But tradition was strong among her people. You walked into my bathing chamber by accident, she said finally. But perhaps you have walked into something much larger. Your presence here, your response to crisis, it supports arguments I have been making about the need for change in our society. Jake was not sure what to say to that. I do not want to cause problems within your culture, Your Highness. You are not causing problems. You are revealing problems that already exist. She stood, indicating the meeting was over. Tomorrow, we will begin formal negotiations with your full team. But I want you to know something, Captain Miller. What happened this morning could have destroyed relations between our peoples. Instead, I believe it may become the foundation for something stronger than a simple treaty. As Jake left the room, his mind was spinning. What had started as a catastrophic mistake was somehow turning into an opportunity. He had come to negotiate a treaty, but he was beginning to suspect that something much more significant was happening. He just hoped he was ready for whatever came next. Word traveled fast through the Velkari palace. By evening, Jake learned from Chancellor Velmoth that everyone knew about the incident. The Chancellor visited their quarters personally, his expression difficult to read. Captain Miller, he said carefully, the court is aware of what happened this morning. There are mixed reactions. Jake felt his stomach drop. I understand, Chancellor. If you need to send us home, I will not argue. The Chancellor's crest shifted in what Jake was learning meant surprise. Send you home? No, Captain. Quite the opposite. The Emperor wishes to meet you personally before the formal negotiations begin. Kate and Ryan looked shocked. Ryan consulted his tablet quickly. That is highly unusual. The Emperor rarely meets with foreign diplomats directly. Nevertheless, the Chancellor said, he has requested Captain Miller's presence in 1 hour. Come alone, Captain, and be yourself. His Majesty is not interested in rehearsed speeches. The meeting with the Emperor took place in a private garden at the top of the highest tower. The Emperor was ancient by human standards, his skin a deep purple that was almost black. His crest was enormous, decorated with jewels and metallic threads, but his eyes were sharp and clear, missing nothing. "Captain Miller," the Emperor said in heavily accented English, "my daughter tells me you turned your back on her this morning." Jake bowed in the Velkhari manner. "Yes, Your Majesty. I made a terrible mistake in entering her private chamber. Turning away was the only respectful action I could take. You trusted her not to attack you while you were vulnerable. I trusted her to be honorable, yes, Your Majesty." The Emperor made a sound that might have been a laugh. "In our culture, what you did would be seen as weakness. Yet my daughter says it was the strongest thing she has witnessed in all her years of diplomacy. Explain this contradiction." Jake chose his words carefully. "Your Majesty, humans believe that real strength is not just about power or perfection. It is about how you handle moments when you are not powerful, when you are not perfect. Anyone can be strong when everything goes right, but it takes real courage to admit when you are wrong and try to make things better." The Emperor was silent for a long time, staring out over his city. "For 3,000 years, our empire has operated on principles of honor and perfection. We have achieved much. We have conquered systems and built wonders. But we have also stagnated. Our last major innovation was 200 years ago. Our people fear change because change means risk, and risk means the possibility of failure." He turned to face Jake directly. "You humans are young. You have only been in space for a handful of decades, yet you innovate constantly. Your technology improves every year. You adapt quickly to new situations. My advisors say this is because you are reckless and foolish, but I wonder if it is because you are not afraid to fail." "We are very afraid to fail, Your Majesty," Jake admitted, "but we have learned that fear of failure is more dangerous than failure itself. If you never try new things because you might fail, you never discover what you are capable of achieving." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Tomorrow negotiations begin. My court will test you harshly, Captain. They will try to find weaknesses in your proposals. Some of them want to reject this treaty because they fear human influence on our culture. Others support it but will demand terms that heavily favor us. Are you prepared for this?" "We will do our best, Your Majesty." "That is a very human answer," the Emperor said. "Not we will succeed or we will be perfect. Just we will do our best. I am beginning to understand why my daughter finds your people so interesting." The formal negotiations began the next morning in a grand hall. The Velkhari delegation numbered 20 individuals, all high-ranking officials or nobles. They sat on one side of an enormous table, while Jake, Kate, and Ryan represented humanity on the other side. Princess Zarathel led the Velkhari delegation. She was all business now, her expression neutral, her questions sharp and probing. She asked about Earth's military capabilities, resource needs, and long-term goals in the galaxy. Every answer was scrutinized by the other Velkhari, who whispered among themselves constantly. Some questions seemed designed to trap Jake. One noble asked what humanity would do if the Velkhari demanded exclusive access to Earth's most valuable resources. Another asked how humans would respond if the treaty terms became unfavorable after signing. Jake answered each question honestly, even when honesty made humans look weak. When he did not know something, he said so openly. When the Velkhari presented seemingly impossible demands, he did not refuse immediately. Instead, he asked questions to understand their underlying concerns, then worked with Kate and Ryan to propose alternative solutions. Kate was brilliant with language, finding ways to phrase agreements that worked in both cultures. Ryan provided historical context, showing how similar treaties had worked between other species. Together, the human team showed flexibility and creativity that clearly impressed some of the Velkhari delegation, but others remained skeptical. An older noble named Thelvar spoke up angrily. "You humans speak of learning from mistakes, but what happens when those mistakes harm others? What happens when your failures affect my people?" It was a fair question, and Jake did not dodge it. Lord Thelvar, you are right to be concerned. Mistakes can cause harm, and no amount of good intentions changes that. All I can promise is that if humans make mistakes that harm the Velkhari, we will take full responsibility. We will work to fix the damage. We will change our behavior to prevent it from happening again. And we will be transparent about what went wrong. Words, Thelvar snapped. Easy to say now. How do I know you will keep these promises? You cannot know for certain, Jake admitted. That is the nature of trust. You have to decide if you believe we will act with honor when it matters. All I can offer as evidence is how I acted yesterday when I made a mistake that could have destroyed these negotiations. The room went very quiet. Princess Zarathel's crest rose slightly, and Jake saw what might have been approval in her expression. Yesterday, she said, addressing the entire delegation, Captain Miller walked into my purification chamber by accident. It was a terrible breach of protocol. In our culture, such an incident would normally end all negotiations immediately. But Captain Miller did not flee or make excuses. He took responsibility. He put my dignity above his own comfort, and he offered to accept any consequences, including ending talks that his people desperately wanted to succeed. She stood, her robes flowing around her. Some of you believe humans are too young and reckless to be our partners. You fear their adaptability means chaos. But I have watched Captain Miller and his team work for days now. They do not have all the answers. They do not pretend to be perfect. But they listen, they learn, and they genuinely try to find solutions that benefit everyone. This, honored delegates, is exactly what our empire needs to learn. The negotiations continued for another week. Slowly, the Velkhari delegation softened. Even Thelvar began asking constructive questions rather than aggressive ones. Jake realized that the princess was fighting a battle within her own culture, using the human delegation as examples of a different way of thinking. On the final day, Princess Zarathel announced that she would be traveling to Earth as part of the cultural exchange program. The entire Velkhari delegation looked shocked. No member of the imperial family had visited another species' homeworld in living memory. If we are to truly understand our new human partners, she said, I must see their world with my own eyes. I must learn how a culture that embraces imperfection has achieved so much. And I must bring these lessons back to our people. The Emperor himself appeared at the end of that session, a rare honor. He looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. Captain Miller, you came here to negotiate a treaty. You have achieved much more. You have shown us that there are different kinds of strength, different paths to success. This is a valuable gift. As Jake watched the Emperor leave, he realized the truth. This treaty was not just about trade and alliances. It was about ideas, about showing the Velkhari that their rigid culture could evolve without losing what made them great. And somehow, through sheer accident and honest reaction, he had become the symbol of that change. The treaty signing ceremony took place 2 weeks after Jake's arrival on Velthoria. The Grand Hall was filled with Velkhari nobles, government officials, and military leaders. Cameras recorded everything, broadcasting the event across all 12 systems of the Velkhari Empire and back to Earth. Jake stood beside Princess Zarathel at the center of the hall. The treaty document was displayed on a holographic screen that everyone could see. It was written in both English and Velkhari, with thousands of carefully negotiated terms covering everything from trade routes to mutual defense. But there were also new elements that had never appeared in Velkhari treaties before. There were clauses about cultural education programs. There were provisions for error tolerance and mistake resolution. There were agreements that both species would approach conflicts with the goal of understanding and improvement, not just punishment and blame. The Emperor stood to address the assembled crowd. His voice was strong despite his age, carrying to every corner of the massive hall. Today, we forge a new path, For thousands of years, our empire has valued perfection and honor above all else. These values have made us strong, but they have also made us rigid. We have feared change because change brings risk of failure. He paused, looking directly at Jake. The humans have taught us something important. They have shown us that perfection is not the only path to greatness. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from admitting imperfection and working to improve. Sometimes, the deepest honor comes from taking responsibility for mistakes rather than avoiding them. The Emperor gestured to Princess Zarathel. My daughter will travel to Earth. She will learn their ways and bring that knowledge back to our people. This treaty is not just an agreement between governments. It is a commitment to learn from each other, to grow together, and to accept that growth sometimes means making mistakes along the way. Princess Zarathel stepped forward to sign the treaty. Her hand was steady as she pressed her palm against the holographic document, leaving a glowing imprint that served as her signature. Then it was Jake's turn. He placed his hand beside hers, and the treaty was sealed. The hall erupted in a sound like wind chimes, the Velkari way of showing approval. Not everyone was happy. Jake could see some nobles whose crests were raised in displeasure, but the majority seemed to support this new direction. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted late into the night. Jake found himself surrounded by Velkari, who wanted to ask questions about Earth and human culture. Some were genuinely curious. Others seemed skeptical but willing to listen. A few remained hostile, but even they were polite in their disagreement. Chancellor Velmoth approached Jake with drinks. You have created quite a stir in our society, Captain. There are those who see you as a revolutionary and those who see you as a threat to our traditions. I never meant to cause division, Jake said honestly. All significant change causes division, the Chancellor replied. The question is whether the change is worthwhile. I believe it is. Our empire has been dying slowly for centuries, strangled by our own fear of imperfection. Perhaps your humans can teach us how to live again. 6 months later, Princess Zarathel arrived on Earth. Jake was assigned as her personal liaison, a role he had not expected but was honored to fill. The princess was fascinated by everything she saw. She visited cities and farms, factories and schools. She spoke with leaders and ordinary citizens. She watched children play and make mistakes, then get back up and try again. One day, they stood in a research laboratory where scientists were working on a new propulsion system. The lead scientist, a woman named Linda Hayes, explained that they had failed over 50 times to get the system working properly. 50 failures, the princess said, her crest raised in surprise. Yet you continue? Your funding has not been withdrawn? You have not been removed from your position? Linda laughed. Removed? No, Your Highness. Each failure teaches us something new. We are closer to success now than we have ever been. That's how science works. That's how progress works. The princess was quiet for a long time after they left the lab. Finally, she said to Jake, on Velthoria, Linda would have been cast out after the third failure. All her knowledge, all her potential, would have been wasted because she could not achieve perfection immediately. How many brilliant minds has my culture thrown away over the centuries? You are working to change that, Jake reminded her. Yes, but change is slow, especially when you are changing ideas that have existed for thousands of years. She looked at him with those golden eyes. Tell me honestly, Captain, do you think your people's way is better than ours? Jake considered the question carefully. I think both cultures have strengths and weaknesses. Velkari dedication to honor and excellence has created an empire that has lasted millennia. Human adaptability has allowed us to survive and thrive despite many disasters. Neither way is perfect. Maybe the best approach is to learn from each other. The princess's skin shifted to a warm blue color that Jake had learned meant contentment. You are a wise man, Jake Miller. More than that, you are a good man. I am glad the universe arranged for you to walk through the wrong door. They worked together to establish the Human Velkari Cultural Institute, a center dedicated to studying and bridging the differences between their species. The institute became famous throughout the galaxy as a model for interspecies cooperation. Diplomats from dozens of other civilizations came to study their methods. The story of how Jake accidentally walked into the princess's bathing chamber became legendary. It was taught to diplomats from both species as an example of how to handle crisis with grace and honesty. Some called it the Miller Doctrine of diplomatic flexibility. Others called it simple human decency applied to alien situations. 2 years after the treaty was signed, Jake stood in the Institute's garden with Princess Zarathel. They watched human and Velkari children playing together. The children were learning each other's games, mixing rules from both cultures to create entirely new ways to play. When disagreements arose, they worked through them without violence or shame. "Look at them," the princess said softly. "They do not carry the weight of our ancient traditions. They do not fear mixing our cultures. To them, this is simply normal." "They are the future," Jake agreed. "Not just of our two species, but of something new. Something that takes the best from both cultures." The princess turned to face him. "I have been authorized to tell you something. The Emperor is implementing reforms across the Empire. Mistakes will no longer mean automatic expulsion from positions of authority. Leaders will be judged on how they respond to errors, not just whether they make them. Scientists and innovators will be given room to fail and learn. It will take generations to fully change our culture, but the process has begun." "That is incredible news," Jake said, genuinely moved. "It is happening because of you. Because you walked through a door by mistake and then responded with dignity and honesty. Because you showed us that vulnerability can be strength and that admitting imperfection can be the first step toward true greatness." Jake shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the princess said firmly. "You did what any good person would do. And in doing so, you changed the course of history for an empire that has existed for 3,000 years. That is not a small thing, Jake Miller." As the sun set over the garden, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jake reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. He had come to Velthoria as a nervous diplomat, hoping not to mess up. He had walked through the wrong door and committed what should have been an unforgivable cultural mistake. But somehow, that mistake had opened doors that might never have opened otherwise. The treaty between Earth and the Velkari Empire became the foundation for humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Other species watched how humans and Velkari worked together, how they learned from each other, and how they turned potential conflicts into opportunities for growth. Humanity's reputation as honest, adaptable diplomats opened relationships with civilizations far more advanced than themselves, and it all started because Jake Miller walked into a room he was not supposed to enter, and then did the only thing that seemed right in that moment. He turned away. He apologized. He took responsibility. He trusted that doing the right thing mattered more than protecting himself. Sometimes, the greatest diplomatic victories come not from perfect execution of protocol, but from simple human decency applied in moments of crisis. Sometimes, walking through the wrong door at the wrong time leads to exactly where you need to be. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jake smiled. He had set out to negotiate a treaty. Instead, he had helped build a bridge between species. And he had learned that the best diplomacy is not about being perfect. It is about being real, being honest, and being willing to admit when you need to learn something new. That lesson would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.